Right, it's 1 o'clock, so let's get started. Is my sound okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to the halfway point of the festival. We've got a very exciting hour ahead of us. We've got Anastasia Logotheti from the American College of Greece, who will give us a talk called Reading Matters, Considering the Challenge of the Digital Environment on Reading Competence. So I'm really looking forward to that. But before we get started, I'll do a few housekeeping announcements. First of all, the session is being recorded. Let me double check that's the case. Yeah, it is. If you don't want to show up on the recording, please make sure your video is turned off. So that's the stop start video button. Make sure there's a red line through it. Then you shouldn't appear in the recording. Other than that, well, we've got an hour ahead of us. Anastasia will lead the session. There is a chat function, so rather than interrupting, you can use the chat to ask questions or make comments. I'll keep an eye on it. And I think that's all I need to say for in terms of housekeeping. Anastasia, can I hand it over to you to get started?
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be part of the festival this year as well. I've been really excited to see some of the presentations yesterday and today. Very inspiring, very humbling what people are doing. And I thought this is the right group for me to share some of my concerns in relation to reading competence. As I'm the director of the Teaching and Learning Center, I get to do a lot of faculty training, but I mostly see my job as learning from colleagues rather than being any kind of expert, especially in this day and age when things change so quickly. So I'm thinking of our discussion today. I'm going to put some parameters in place, but really this is more of a kind of crowdsourcing discussion where I'm hoping that over the course of the next 50 minutes or whatever, we're going to be able together to consider some of the challenges related to one of the most vital skills, reading, and maybe share some good practices and good ideas. So I'll start by sharing my slides. There is a Padlet that I'm using for you to have access to resources, and Flo may share that with you. So, and you're going to see it on the slides as well. And again, Flo will hopefully share things from the chat. I'll try to monitor the chat. It's really difficult to try to look at the chat and talk at the same time. So
I'll keep an eye on the chat and I'll let you know if there's anything important. No worries.
Great. And as I said, I'm thinking of this more as a discussion. So we should be able to just interrupt, and I'll be stopping at different points so we can talk as well. So let me put this in full mode. So the title kind of gives you the context for this discussion. I am a professor of English. I've been teaching literature for a very long time in the US, but mostly at the American College of Greece, Deree College, four-year undergraduate college, typical English degree with a variety, a lot of Greek students, as you would guess, but a lot of international students as well. So this is a concern that I've had for at least the last 10 years, and things have been changing and maybe escalating. And partly, and part of the issue certainly relates to a challenge that the humanities have been under, and a kind of an attack that the humanities have been under for perhaps 20, 30 years now. And maybe, you know, we've been moving in an opposite direction in the last few years, but again, that's part of the very, very broad context that we can talk about. So I'm in a discipline where the reading and the interpretation of text is, of course, vital. And a good reader is, in my book, a good listener, somebody that develops excellent critical thinking skills. And I really believe in English as a discipline, really sharpening somebody's soft skills. And that has led to also our graduates really going in for a variety of professions over the last decades. So I'm very passionate about literature. I'm very passionate about learning. I've had the privilege of also being the director of the Teaching and Learning Center for 12, 13 years now. I'm nearing the end of my career as an educator, but I am always eager to learn. I'm always eager to see what we can do and how we can face challenges that have been coming up. And the this decade of the 21st century has certainly given us a number of challenges. The pandemic certainly was one, and the digital environment and digital technologies, even before Gen AI showed up, certainly another. On that cover slide, and if you've gone to the Padlet, you will see that I have this image there as well. Padlet now has embedded AI into it, and this image that you see on my cover slide is one generated through Padlet. I gave Padlet the group in the AI image generator that it incorporates, a group of engaged readers, and some of the representations I got were a little schematic, a little cartoonish, but look at this one. I think even AI is giving us a sense of an engaged reader as something that belongs to the past. So I really laughed when I saw that, and I thought, oh my God, you know, the doom and gloom that I am slightly exaggerating here may be even something that Gen AI has picked up. So let me change the slides. So I'm very interested in knowing what are your concerns in relation to broadly reading skills, reading competence, the Padlet that you're going to actually see the QR code for now. And please use either the URL that has been shared through the chat or the QR code here to go to the Padlet. There is a poll in the Padlet. There is information about a lot of the resources that I will mentioning, that I will be talking about. So if you actually want to access immediately one of those studies or one of the things I'm going to be talking about, and there are other things that I've added there that are actually not on the PowerPoint. So we can use the chat for your own experiences. I will be stopping, as I said, and hopefully we will have a good discussion. So I've already kind of given you a sense of where I am and where I'm coming from. I will be sharing some recent findings But I'm not going to overwhelm you with research. I mean, there can be more discussions there and more things from the things that I've been reading if we want that. But I'm very interested in your personal experiences. I'll share some of my personal experiences from the literature classroom, but I'm very interested in yours. And there is already on the Padlet an invitation of how we can together think in terms of active learning suggestions. I'll tell you about things that I have done, but I think even if we are repeating some of the things that may work consistently for those of us present, that it will be a good collection of activities and a good collection of experiences. So, is this something that occupies you as well? Yesterday, I was attending one of the wonderful sessions. I think it was in the afternoon. Yes, it was the first of two problem-based learning sessions. This wonderful person was talking about the flipped classroom paradigm and what the change it made. Brilliant and very encouraging and very inspiring presentation. And somebody asked, how do you get students to do the pre-reading? This was somebody in the audience. I don't know if this person is with us today, but of course that was an experience that resonates with me very much, because assigning reading and expecting students to come to class prepared to teach text, that is what the literature classroom is all about. So given the fact that, and the person yesterday said, even if I assign a paragraph, I know students are not going to read it. I have to make sure that we make time in class to do that reading. When students come to my class, they usually have to read much longer texts. So how are you feeling about that? Is this something that resonates with you, that is a common experience? Do you find that, especially if you have a longer experience in the classroom, that your students' ability to read in a more comprehensive manner, in a more strategic manner, in a more conscious manner, in a more critical manner, has been affected by technology? And I don't mean just the latest generative AI technology. I'm talking about the fact that we consider our students now, the typical college student age, to be digital natives. It is a text that, excuse me, it's a term that I'm uncomfortable with, mostly because it suggests a kind of comprehensive level of competence when it comes to technology. I don't think this is the case, but what we can be certain about is that they all engage with the latest social media, and that the predominantly visual social media, TikTok and Instagram, are certainly their favorites at the moment, until the latest, of course, medium shows up. But these are not text-based social media. So is this something that you think your students are affected by? Do you generally find that they do any reading beyond the social media? I recently was talking to an old student. She graduated many years ago. Although she was an economics major, she would take literature courses because she loves literature. She's still a great reader. She was telling me how upset she and her husband is because her daughter, who is now a high school student, although both parents do so much reading in their spare time, and the book and their house is full of reading, full of books, full of reading material, that they cannot get their daughter, ever since she was a child, although she was read to, etc., they cannot get her to go through a book, even if a few of her friends might at some point suggest something, that she's always on a screen, she's always on her iPad, she's a good student, but they would like her to be a reader on top of that. So it was very interesting for me to hear this unprompted kind of feedback from one of my old students, who is now herself a parent. And of course, this is something that, as an educator, I feel is a challenge that we have to meet. It's a challenge we cannot ignore. It is definitely affecting the competence of our students, and we want our students to be as good in the critical thinking skills as possible, and that includes, of course, the reading ability. So because this is a phenomenon that, especially in the last few years, I've been kind of collecting literature on, one of the things that has happened, and this happened in 2022, is a group of European scholars got together, and in 2022, and this is before ChatGPT was released into the world in late November 2022, came up with and presented what they call the Ljubljana Reading Manifesto. And there's a paper attached to it, and on the Padlet you can actually go and read the paper, but also this is a page where many well-known writers and various less known people, like scholars and librarians and so on, have added their signatures. So this is actually something that you can add your signature to. And from their abstract, I am quoting, while digital technologies offer much potential for new forms of reading, recent empirical research shows that the digital environment is having a negative effect on long-form reading and reading comprehension. So clearly, this is something that internationally educators are feeling strongly about. Discovering that this is an international phenomenon has certainly made me feel better. It hasn't resolved the challenge, but it certainly has shown that this is just bigger and broader than myself, my colleagues, what I hear from around me. So here are two very recent studies. The first, AI meets the classroom. When does ChatGPT harm learning? This was first published. These are preprints, both of the things that I'm sharing here, from February, March last year. And the latest iteration that you're going to find online is actually from March. So they keep returning and adding to this. And as you see, again, we're talking about scholars, Germany, Europe, Central Europe. So again, this is something that seems to be of concern in relation to the latest technology, Gen AI and ChatGPT. And the second, which comes from Wharton, University of Pennsylvania. So one European study, one American study, which is less tentative. It doesn't ask the question, when does ChatGPT harm learning? It actually says that it does. So what has now become an issue in mainstream media, and this is something that appeared in the Atlantic last November, and that's a pretty long article. And again, you will find the link on Padlet, and do read it if you haven't come across it before. It has to do, and I was really shocked to hear this about now a problem of students not wanting to read a book in the most prestigious elite places. Places that are currently under attack by the current American US government, and those places that we actually consider. And I remember a friend, he's a big name in Yale 20 years ago when he had visited ACG, and he was less established, and at the time doing quite a bit of teaching, and we had co-taught in the literature classroom, and he was very pleased with how engaged the students were. And he said, you know, at Yale, the students come prepared, but they don't always engage. Greek students tend to engage, our students tend to engage. It may have something to do with the Mediterranean temperament as well, but that doesn't mean that they have actually come to class prepared. So everybody in the US, in Europe, they are talking about students not wanting to read books. We're not talking about studying, we're just talking about reading. So let's see if we have any contributions. I'm going to stop sharing now. Look at our Padlet. There is a poll there as well. We can look at the chat. So let me see if we can share the Padlet. Oh, wait, I need to get rid of this, get to the Padlet, and I should be able now to share the Padlet. Okay, so now you are seeing the Padlet. If you and what you see here also, PISA, that's another thing that I added there. I didn't talk about it actually, but again, I've copied the latest from the PISA results, that their latest, and this year it's a 3-year cycle, because one of the things that they look at is actually reading skills. Math, reading, and science are the 3 domains where students get, and these are high school students, 15-year-olds, and the latest results showed a decline in overall performance in all areas. So that includes reading skills as well. So Wendy here, thank you. I see you've talked about concentration and attention rather than comprehension. I absolutely agree with that. Let me see if we can see results, if okay, so I see that we are almost divided. Maybe I'm thinking it's, as Wendy suggests, an issue with terminology. Maybe some of you are saying sometimes because you're thinking more in terms of concentration rather than comprehension. So that perhaps has something to do with it. I definitely agree, because that is one of the things that my students are sharing as well, when they have to read some of the more challenging texts. They tell me that I have to go back and I have to start again, or I cannot do more than a page and a half at a time because the material is challenging. So that might be perhaps another poll that we could do. But some of you are also finding that, yes, additionally comprehension is one. There is some of you are adding general lack of focus, motivation, of course. And Mariam has added an incredibly powerful point here about the online content. Kim, fear of books. Okay, a real fear of using a textbook. Wow. Okay, that would be great to actually talk more about the relationship to old-fashioned print material. And Catherine is talking about the use of reading on the screen. Yes, I think very few students now engage with hard copies. This is definitely the case, although I do a lot of my reading, obviously, on a screen as well. When it comes to literature, I always go to class with my hard copy, my notes. I'm very traditional when it comes to engaging with the literary text. Lots of great stuff. Let me pause here. And Joshua agrees. Reading on paper is more enjoyable. I appreciate this comment because I feel less like a dinosaur, which is how sometimes my students make me feel. Maybe, you know, I'm now past a certain point where, you know, doing the old-fashioned thing doesn't feel old-fashioned to me. So it's great to have support on this matter. Let me pause, ask Flo if there are comments or questions in the chat before I go on, or if one of you would like to contribute in some way by unmuting yourself.
Paolo has his hand up.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about sort of, I mean, I think reading and text is very useful because we can reread it and it's easily navigable, you can search it. And whereas the video, I think, is a little bit harder to go back and forth and find things. But I was also thinking about how probably students find videos and interactive content that much more engaging, and I don't know if they are watching much more videos compared to what they're reading. But also I was thinking then the production of knowledge becomes more difficult because you have to create an engaging video, or perhaps with embedded interactivity, perhaps, or whatever. And then perhaps what you can disseminate in any case may not be at the same level somehow. I'm not sure. So I don't really know. That's my head. Well, my head went all sorts of places. I've got this long. I've written a whole bunch of stuff that probably is quite tangential. Yeah, but yeah. I guess the question. I guess from what I just said, I guess the question is, if you were to produce a video and say put it on your learning site, do you think that would be engaged with where a reading wouldn't be? Yes.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to this because, you know, we had to do this during the pandemic. So in Greece, we had quite a lot of lockdowns, governmentally imposed lockdowns, and we spent nearly 3 semesters, or at least part of 3 semesters, doing emergency remote teaching and learning. So we were actually synchronously online. And to try to engage the students who were also staying at home, they were more isolated, I increased tremendously the amount of videos that I would record. I mean, we became very proficient because we also had time and nowhere to go, producing material and putting it online. And initially, and this is something that I'm finding, that there is a kind of curve. So when you introduce a new digital tool or a new activity, there is a novelty value to it. So students are going to engage more initially. So you begin to tell them there are videos, or I would take snippets from YouTube videos from, let's say, academics saying something, and for 30 seconds or 45 seconds, and then I would put a question and I would say, video diary, your response, something like that. So we could also have the face value there. And the first time you would have everybody do it. The second time it would go down to 90%, then 80%, then half the class would be doing it. And then you would have to come up with another tool. I mean, Padlet is something I use a lot. I find it, and it has improved over time. I find it sensational. I've had similar experiences. The first time I use it, students get very enthusiastic, especially if they haven't come across somebody else using it. And then the novelty value of it is going to peter out. What I'm finding very interesting, riffing off what you said, Paolo, is the fact that, let's say, earlier on in my career, I would have to stop students from watching a film of an adaptation of a play or a novel. So I would say, please, please, please don't watch this Great Expectations or this Hamlet production before you read the play or before you read the novel. Now I'm begging them to watch the film as a way into the book or into the play. So I've convinced the library at high expense to buy this entire collection of Shakespeare plays, drama online, a wonderful collection of performances of Shakespeare's plays that I have thoroughly enjoyed. And praise the library to no end for, paying every year for this quite expensive collection. And students, I would tell them, look, the best way to engage with a Shakespeare play is actually watch a performance. Watch a performance first. Don't try reading the text first. Remember, most of our students have not gone through British education at the secondary level, so they would be reading or coming to terms with Shakespeare for the first time in college. I know it's demanding, so I will say, watch a performance. Maybe 2 or 3 students will do it. I tend to give them a discussion board activity of debate, who is a better Hamlet, watch at least a part of this performance and a part of this performance, and put down one reason why you think Benedict Cumberbatch is a better Hamlet than Andrew Scott. I mean, I have done so much, and I'm finding that I teach Shakespeare once a year, every time in the fall, and every time I have to rethink all of the activities. I have to come up with new activities. new exercises, new ways of using the visual material. And it's always like I'm a step behind the disengagement. They absolutely love visual content, but I'm finding that unless I resort to creating 10,000 25-second TikTok videos chopping up a performance of Hamlet, that they are not going to be able to watch. You know, here is Hamlet in its entirety in 2,500 TikTok snippets. And I'm joking, obviously, but this is a real issue. And what seems to work one time may not work a year later when you return to the same module. So absolutely tested these things. That doesn't mean I don't keep working with these and I don't keep using these. It's just that I will reshuffle and change and so on and so forth. I see Joshua has a hand up. You may be muted.
No, we still can't hear you, Joshua.
Well, you don't seem muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Just had to tell my system to use the right microphone. Yeah, I'm really glad you put on this session, Anastasia. And I think this is a discussion that isn't happening enough. So a provocation, I suppose, from me. I suspect, and I haven't seen data on this, that a big part of the issue with successfully getting people to read and read deeply is the medium by which we're asking students to read. And I've already posted the paper is better, etc., which I believe is supported by data. But I think also the devices that students use to access these texts, if they are reading digitally, matter a great deal. And I think from personal experience, I know that if I'm reading on a laptop, my attention is not going to be good. I'm going to skip, skim, and move on as quickly as possible, read extremely strategically. If I move to something like a tablet, I might be a little bit more able to read deeply. If I use an e-ink reader, I can definitely read almost as well as I can on paper. And if I'm reading on paper, then now I'm not a digital native, obviously, but I think that the data does show that digital natives also, excuse the term, are follow a similar trend. So I guess my provocation is, does the sector need to take more seriously the new habit of acquiring e-texts almost exclusively and providing them to students in that manner, using all these sort of e-hosting, ebook hosting services and aggregators that distribute ebooks to libraries, and then providing students with this ultimate choice of, do I read the text using the provided ebook, which will be on a browser on my laptop most of the time, which is, for I think most people, very uncomfortable, very difficult to really achieve an emotional or sort of motivational attachment to, or do I like spend a bunch of money on buying my own book, or do I even think of that option? So what can the sector do here? And how could we provoke the sector to think about this more seriously? I guess that's my my provocation and question. What do you think?
I think you're making an amazing point. We find ourselves, and you're absolutely right, in a kind of vicious cycle where not only the fact that we've switched to institutionally to these huge databases. I mean, we offer our students at ACG access to Perlego, which is, and before that we had Vital Source, or we also have Vital Source, because it is cheaper. So it makes financial sense for the students. So that's a privilege that we say we give the students. And simultaneously, we're kind of taking care of the fact that students were not buying very expensive textbooks. And it might make sense if you're only going to be using something very narrowly, or if it's a textbook that will very quickly lose its value. But the fact that we're encouraging students, and this is an extremely valid point, to access texts that are primary works, and not just in literature, but in the humanities, that ask students to engage with primary works, whether it is in philosophy or primary works in sociology or psychology and so on and so forth. And we do not think in terms of the need for students to create a library, and we think that they're going to have a digital library, a digital bookshelf. And you also made a very valid point about the medium, and what I'm seeing, because I'm now feeling so desperate for students to read the novel, to read the play in any way possible. I'm finding myself actually not only linking to the library copy, e-copy, to a Perlego version, to a free web version. I'm actually making an argument in class. Look, with an electronic version of the text, you can actually, and there are, like for Shakespeare, concordances, wonderful concordances. So if you're looking to find how many times in this play this particular term is used, you can use the concordance. I mean, these are great digital tools. And I'm also spending time in class trying to show students that for some things, a digital version of the text may have some benefits. But is this also me somehow giving them the liberty to think this is a better version of the text? I mean, that's something that I think we really need to consider and think about. And also the size of the screen, because you said laptop, an e-reader, a tablet, and some of our students are reading texts on their phones. And my God, yes, I see them in class. Sometimes looking, because I will challenge them, where did you see that? Where is that? Or I will try to put up a particular page and say, look at this sentence, very intensely trying to show them close reading, and they are going to scroll on their phone. So I can tell that this is not them at that point looking through something else other than the text. And I cannot believe that they're trying to do it and that they can find something through their phone screen. So yes, I think this is something that institutionally needs to be viewed differently. And of course, the big question is, what can we do, as you said, to get the sector to understand the long-term effects of this? So absolutely agree with you. I don't know if in the chat there is some other, I can go back.
Well, there was a point, Wendy made a point earlier, you just mentioned textbooks. Wendy made a point earlier saying in a recent survey I did, students said they loved reading but struggled with time management, which has a knock-on effect on ability to complete. working from a textbook where all the reading worked really well, but when they have to find their own articles and read them individually, that's where time management seems to impact the most. So it goes contrary to what you were saying earlier, maybe about textbooks and primary sources. So.
I can, there are a couple of more slides that I have, and I actually talk about primary and secondary sources, so I can very quickly share again the slides and maybe check the next slide. So I already shared a lot of personal experience, mostly from reading primary works. In terms of reading scholarship, I now, in every single class, although these may be students that I see semester after semester, in every single class, I have to take them through critical articles to show them how they are structured. They tend and how to be strategic in reading scholarship. And in some cases, this works better than getting them to do close reading of primary texts. So I find that the ability for close reading of a literary text is where they have the greatest challenge in terms of being able to be analytical. So they sometimes have an easier time reading scholarship on primary works strategically rather than reading the primary text, because there they have to pay attention to details. Always you have to think in terms of engagement, of course, but I am really focusing on mostly the students that I would say make an effort and are engaged, and sometimes I see that they don't retain even some superficial aspects because they may be details, but when it's details about the literary text. So one of the things that I find that you have to, let's say, prompt the students. They may have read The Great Gatsby. Some of them maybe carefully, and then you'll say, where does the action take place? And they can't tell you the actual location. So they will sometimes skip things that they don't see as important, but they don't necessarily see the connection in terms of how knowledge leads to a deeper kind of understanding. So things get complex the more you deepen, okay, the engagement with the texts. And this is why I think that your suggestions and how we can build this kind of crowdsourced understanding of the complexity of the issue, and precisely because at this point in time we're all struggling to figure out generative AI, how generative AI affects our material. You probably know that now students can ask for summaries from generative AI, actually turn any literary work into a podcast that they can listen to, where you have yourself and an avatar or two bots chatting about a particular thing, and it only takes seconds, as long as you know how to access Notebook LM, Google's Notebook LM, or you're asking any chatbot to give you a summary, and so on and so forth. So we are trying to figure out the challenges of the latest technology, and it's a technology that constantly throws new possibilities. But the emerging problems that have to do with concentration, with the digital environment, and these are things that are very much 21st century, so they're not as new as generative AI, but generative AI only makes things more complex. So I'm wondering whether there are more suggestions that we can look at. I have my information there. I would love to continue to chat, but I think our Padlet, and I will stop sharing here. I think our Padlet, and I can have a look at the chat also, but if people would like to also unmute themselves and or just write something in the chat, or more significantly, I think add to the Padlet. Paolo, you raised your hand again?
I cut out my first degree was a chemistry, so this is my disclaimer before I say what I'm about to say. But so do students understand why reading the primary text is important? And if they can get hold of a summarized, get the meaning and from a summarized version, what do they know? What's wrong with doing that? I guess that's my provocation to you.
Yeah. So another of the interesting things that come from my personal experiences is and relates to the distractions of the digital world and what it means to have the digital world in the palm of your hands all the time, is when I get students in class and I will say, put away your phones and distribute a text. Sometimes I will do this also to get a writing sample from them, which is so important this day and age. And I will say, maybe I will give them pair work or group work. You can talk among yourselves first, but then I want 2 or 3 sentences that, gives me the gist of this little text. And it can be a paragraph from a novel, or it can be a very short poem. And sometimes when you give students 10 minutes of uninterrupted time, or you get them to do a little bit of brainstorming by themselves, or then collaborate with others, they come up with amazing things that they wouldn't come up if you let them do something similar at home, and they do it at home. So it's very interesting how when you remove some of the distractions and you force them for 10 minutes to think of this and only this, and sometimes it doesn't even have to be 10 minutes, it will get them thinking, and they get stimulated. So it's not that they don't have opportunities to see for themselves why it's important. And some, because of course, at the end of class, apart from doing evaluations, and their evaluations, they give me good evaluations. If I ask them, what would you like to do differently? Because there's so much variety in the classes, they don't really have something else. Sometimes if I say, oh, we didn't do very well, they will even console me, and they will say, it's not your fault, okay? We didn't have time One is going to say, I'm doing my capstone course now, and I couldn't really concentrate on this. So they will kind of blame themselves, or they will tell you, no, you've done everything possible, blah, blah, blah. But you know that these are very kind, but superficial and not very sincere ways of confronting maybe their own lack of discipline. But to what extent have we made it possible for them to have discipline? So, and maybe to what extent have we made it clear to them that reading well, deeply, comprehensively is important? So it may have something to do with us going back to that basis of what matters. This is why I chose Reading Matters for my title, because of course we've been talking about reading matters, but also because reading matters. And maybe we have taken this for granted. Maybe we haven't communicated this institutionally to our students. We are always talking about the broad skill base. We have program outcomes. We check and assess and validate our programs, and everything is there on paper, but maybe we need to reinvent ways of communicating the basics to our students.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We are pretty much at the 2 o'clock mark, so we're going to have to wrap up here. But like you said, the Padlet will stay open. So if people want to continue the discussion,
Yes.
please use Anastasia's Padlet. Sorry. The other thing I should say, there is a feedback form, which is for the same link for all the sessions, but I'll put it in the chat. Obviously we still have a whole day tomorrow, but there's also mosh pit activities. So from the festival Padlet or the festival slides, there's a walking Padlet and one about pets and one about food. They're really fun to get involved in, so please have a look at those if you have time as well. And if not, thank you very much, Anastasia, for that interesting talk. Really enjoyed it. And we'll see everybody tomorrow. Oh no, this afternoon still at 4 o'clock.
We have a 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
Thank you very much to everyone. And we'll be in touch, and thank you for all the contributions. I will be looking at them very, very carefully.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.